this is Tom with Fresh Vintage. Today we have our 2004 Acura TSX. We're going to go ahead and put some new brakes and rotors on the rear side of this vehicle. This is our Powerstop rotor, and we got these from Amazon. You can see they are drilled and slotted. Let's get started. We're going to go ahead and jack up the back side of the car and put the jack stands under it. So without crawling under the car, you can't really see it. But underneath here, the back end of the subframe is a little bit further than this, but we want to put this jack stand under the pinch weld here. At least that's where we're going to put this one. So you just want to carefully bring the car up. Looking under here, everything's good. And wheel is off the ground. We're going to go ahead, put our jack stand right there. Slowly let this down. There we go. And you always want to, that car's not going anywhere. So let's do the other side. Okay, so obviously this Acura is front wheel drive, but we just wanted to be safe, so we went ahead and blocked both front wheels just to give that a little extra level of immobility so this thing doesn't move while we're taking the rear wheels off the ground. So we have the jack set up under here, touching the back end of the subframe. Tighten that up. And the pinch weld is right here. Go up one more pump. There we go. So we have our rear brakes here. We're going to go ahead and take the wheel off. See what these things look like. We have our caliper here we want to take off. These are actually 12 millimeter from what I see here. So I want to go ahead and just break these free. There we go. Just like that. Okay, so quick call out here. Zoom in, get a little close. But this is actually moving. Like you could sit here until you're 80 years old and this isn't going to come loose because you have to get this part to stop. And we'll go ahead and do this. And that one is not moving. Okay, so we have our caliper here. We want to get off of the rear brakes. The problem is we can't get it off of there, and you can see it's trying, but there's actually the parking brake cable right here that is holding it on. So we need to do a few things. We need to actually get us a clip holding the parking brake on. There we go. Okay, so we have that off. Now, after some looking, we confirmed there's actually a nut here. I'm sorry, it should be really a bolt, but you have to take this spring off. And there's your nut that you may not have seen before. And then in this, it actually gives you the ability to get the parking brake cable out of this bracket that you may or may not be able to see. There. And then that lets you take the actual cable off of this assembly here. And then in theory, this should come right off the car. Alright, so as part of the parking brake bracket assembly here, this needs to come off. And after looking at this, once we get this off of here, it should allow us to get the caliper off. That was a 14 millimeter, by the way. Make sure that this will drop on the ground. Okay, so there's our bracket. and our 14 millimeter. And there we go. And we do have a bungee cord. I'm gonna let that sit right there. It could be okay there, but we don't want to find out the hard way it's not okay and then have to do a brake line today. That would not be fun. So we're just gonna go ahead and give this a little support. You can hook it in one of the holes, but this line is so short, like honestly the way this line's routed, the brake line, it's not going to go anywhere. So that's right there. We have our impact screwdriver here. Always make sure you take a minute. That's solid in there, just looking at it. If these are even loose at all, like a little bit loose, you want to make sure you find the exact the best one that fits. Because if you strip these, it becomes a very onerous drilling out session, which no one wants to do that. But you want to go ahead and give these a couple hits. And the idea here is inside this unit, as you push and you provide the percussion with the hammer, it actually turns and it provides an impacting turn on these. So when you give these things a couple good hits, these things actually will loosen up, just like this. There we go. So there's that one. We'll do this. Oops, and be careful, that hammer, or the screwdriver will jump out of there. This is a great time to say, when you're putting these back together, make sure you have some anti-seize, because if you plan on owning this car for several years, if not 10 years or so, you don't want to have to deal with these like 5 years down the road being rusted into here and then have to deal with that. So, but those are out, so we're going to go ahead and take our caliper bracket off right now. Yep, 14. And hitting that and hurting your hand is probably not what you want to do. So that one's loose, but let's take this one with the breaker bar. We have a breaker bar, but I don't want to, kill myself trying to get this loose. So if you have room, you may have room, you may not. You can use the jack handle in here. You just need a little bit to get this loose. Flip this over. Go. Okay. And there we go. Having quality tools makes a difference between having a long day fixing your car and a not too bad of a day. We've used a 12 millimeter, 14 millimeter ratchet, 3/8 drive, breaker bar, the jack handle, jack stands, and so on, impact gun. And you don't have to buy all this stuff at once. Everyone thinks, oh, I go out and get a second mortgage on my house. Just buy one of these, one paycheck. Buy a set of wrenches with one paycheck and build it up. In a few years, you have a complete set of tools. Just don't buy any more coffee straw. All right, so you can see we took our screws out. Our rotor's pretty much loose. I'm just trying to get these bolts out here, and the caliper bracket will come off. Very, very close. That. And this is off. Still has a brake pad in there. And here's our rotor. Yeah, these definitely needed changed. All right, let's get the new stuff installed. All right, so we have our Powerstop rotor here, drilled and slotted for maximum performance. These both had rear driver and passenger, and as a side note, the front ones have the same thing. So they do a great job with these. We're just going to go ahead and hit them real quick. Some brake clean. That. Go. And then you want to make sure you line up your holes, your screw holes. Okay, and you can see these are actually straight across. The fronts, they're slightly offset. So make sure you line these up properly. That looks like it right there. There we go. We have our new screws here. We're going to go ahead and put them in. And if these feel like they suddenly get hard, you know, turning, you need to stop and get them back out of there because you're cross-threading them. But these are going in real smooth. And there's a torque spec on these, so we'll look that up, but cranking these down now. And you see what I just did there. I don't like that, so that one's coming back out. I'll leave it for the next guy. Good, not leave it. Oh, good enough. We'll let the next guy deal with it. That ain't cool. And that's an old one. Wow, luck of the draw. We got a bag of screws. There's probably 10 screws over here, and I randomly just grabbed one of the old ones. Okay, so there's that. Go. Tight. All right, so we have our caliper bracket here. And this is where we want to look at the actual brake pads themselves. These are carbon fiber infused. You've heard of like McLarens and other guys having carbon fiber brakes on them, and they're like $2,000 or something. These are ceramic brake pads with carbon fiber actually infused inside them. So we're excited to see what these do and how they work long term. But they look really, really nice, and they feel really solid. I mean, these feel as good as any other set of brake pads I've ever bought and installed on a car. But we're going to go ahead and replace the old slider assemblies here, the brackets. We're going to go ahead and put the new ones on here right now. All right, so we have our caliper bracket here, and these are easy enough to come out and replace. There's that one. There's that. All right. And these are moving nicely. Those actually let the brake, if you think about the brake pads moving back and forth when you hit the pedal, the brake pedal. So those are moving and allows the entire caliper to float. So we're going to go ahead and start reassembling this. Caliper bracket, we're going to go ahead and put this on here. We have our 14mm bolts in here. Just have a little patience. I was trying to get these to thread in here. There's that one. And the hardest one is the first one. Once you get the first one, the second one goes in fairly quick and easy. 14mm here. These are pretty long, honestly. Okay, make sure you torque these down. So now what we want to do is actually get this caliper piston back in, because if you stop and look, your brake pads are thicker, your rotor's thicker, everything's thicker, so you need more space in here to actually fit the caliper over this. So we're going to go ahead and cut these open, and then we're going to push that piston back in right now. These are our old brake pads, and looking at these, I'm just spot checking them against the new ones, because you can technically, let me grab the other one here. Technically for this, you could do the wrong one, so make sure you got the right ones. And then we have our synthetic brake component lubricant, aka grease. It's not grease, but this just helps keep the brakes potentially from chattering and helps these things move back and forth. So we'll install this one. There's that one. And then we'll install this one. Okay. Put this in there. Everything nice and greased up and happy. There's that one. Okay, so looking at this caliper, you may notice this looks like a big plus sign, or if you had a screwdriver, big screwdriver. Reason being is on the front calipers they just push, the pistons push. These actually screw, they actually turn. So when you pull the parking brake, they'll actually twist out to engage the parking brake mechanism when you park the car. With that, we need to twist those back in and effectively screw them back into place. We went to our local Advanced Auto Parts and we got our master disc brake kits. And you can rent these at any Advance, they have them in stock. And just make sure you open it this side, otherwise you're going to have everything fall out. So go ahead and open this up. And this kit not only comes with the stuff for the rear parking brake and caliper to push it back in, it actually has quite a bit of stuff you would need for a brake job. So great kit, definitely recommend it at any local Advanced Auto Parts. What we're doing here with this is we're going to look for the exact right unit that goes in here. And you can see that one almost fits in there. And as you read through this, it actually breaks down the different cars. So, Honda, Acura, and whatnot. It'll actually show you and explain how to use this. The idea here is we want to build a tool using this here and this to actually screw this back in. And then as we turn this, it will actually rotate and twist that back in, kind of like a gigantic screw basically. So we're going to go ahead and set this up and then we'll show you what it looks like on here. Okay, so we have here our actual piston pushing tool, or in this case it's actually a screwing tool, and let me show you how I assembled this. I'll take it all apart. This has the base unit, this has fingers on it so to speak, and you need to choose the one that actually will fit because these are different diameter. So you need to choose the one that'll actually fit. Like those are pretty solid in there. So that's this half of it, but you still need something to keep it from going backwards. And that's where this comes in. And if you just slip it over here, and I had already kind of like prepped this the right length. This will take you a minute to get where you need it to be, but you can slide this in here, and then that's ideally what you're looking for. Is the tool is going to screw this back into the actual caliper assembly. So we're going to go ahead and do that now and actually slowly turn this, and you'll see that piston start going back in to the actual caliper. You can see it's starting to move now, and this may slip on you like that because this should be centered. It might move on you a little bit. So take your time. We're almost there. Little tip, I'm like kind of holding it against the back trailing arm of the car right now, and that seems to be helping, so I can keep some pressure on this. I believe that's about as far back as I'm going to get that, because it's just spinning right now. So we're going to go ahead and give this a try here. There we go. Now, we're not 100% done here yet because we have to put the actual parking brake assembly back together. So we're going to do that right now. Here. And I'm going to utilize a screwdriver here. There we go. So that is in place now. There's a few things we need to reassemble. We're basically reassembling the parking brake assembly. And this here is the bracket that holds the end of the cable. So this needs to come on to right here. Oops. So I'm actually going to put this back on here. Just kind of like set it there. And then as we come under here, your little nub here comes in here. There's that. And there's a screw, bolt, I should say. So we have, to make sure I'm saying it right, 14 millimeter. Obviously it's tight enough because I just pulled the caliper off of there. There's that. Yep. So hold this in place. Give that a tighten. There we go. Final tightening. And from here, you need to reinstall the actual, oops, 17 millimeter bolt here. You need to reinstall your brake, emergency brake cable. So to do that, oops, make sure I have my ratchet in the right direction. And you need to turn this. You see how that's turning? You need to put this up through here, and then at the same time, slowly move this so that this will hook on here. So there's that. And that's key because you need to do that before you put your spring back on, because that spring actually covers that bolt head. And then this spring's actually pretty weak. I'm just doing that with my fingers. So we're about 90% reassembled there. The one thing you don't want to forget is your clip. So you want to make sure your parking brake cable is as up as far as possible. Make sure you put this in right side up. If you put it upside down, it'll just be, you know, in here moving around. Let's try to tap this in here. There we go. It's good that it's taking a little bit of effort to go in there because it's definitely spring tensioned in there. But our assembly is completely back together. After a quick check of the brakes here, I just make sure they're in here straight and smooth. I'll go ahead and put this caliper back on. There's that. We have our caliper bolts in here. They're nice and smooth. They're not going in hard. 12 millimeter, 3/8 drive. We'll tighten these up. And you can already see that one's turning, so we're going to need to get the wrench. So 17 millimeter. And it's a little sloppy, but unless you have a 16.5 millimeter laying around, 17 will work. So, and that one's plenty tight. Good. Actually, let me do it this way. There we go. There we have it. I'll put the wheel back on now. We're going to put this on the car now. I always like to start with the bottom. These are 80 foot-pounds. Do not, and I stress do not, use over 80 foot-pounds on these, and I say that because these lug studs that I'm screwing the lug nuts onto are aluminum. So if you're just going to come in here and do this, you could legitimately break the lug stud off of the wheel bearing hub assembly, so don't do that. We have a torque stick here. We're going to go ahead and put it on here and torque these down. Driver's side's done. We're going to go ahead and work on replacing these brakes right now, and that'll be a rather fast version, so here we go. Alright, we got our new brakes on, new rotor on, everything's moving, nothing's bound up. Parking brakes back together. We double checked all the bolts and nuts, make sure everything's tight, everything felt solid. Go ahead and put our wheel on. Point the Acura up, not that that makes a difference. Okay. Thank you, lug nuts.
Did you call me a lug nut?
Lug nut. So when you're putting these back on, like we talked about the other side, 80 foot-pounds of torque, and with that we're going to go ahead and torque these down. 5-bolt star pattern. Please do not do a circle. People do that more often than you would think. But if you like vintage cars, if you like muscle cars, if you like classic cars, if you like JDM, if you like DSM, Fresh Vintage is the place to be. We hope you enjoyed this video, and we ask that you like the video and subscribe. And thanks for watching.